This is Super Yacht News in association with Go Earth Boating, navigating boat buyers to better deals. Hi, welcome back to the channel. So we've got video footage here of crew members, or what appears to be crew members, being detained by officials in the US, ICE agents we believe they are. This is happening in South Florida, and you can see there are 3 members of crew, initially identifiable 2 female crew members in the light coloured white shirts and sort of cream coloured skirts, and they appear to have their hands tied behind their backs. Obviously I can't see any handcuffs, but you can assume that that's what's happening there. Later on in the video there's a third person who's also got his hands behind his back. I can see that he's also apparently a crew member. Now this is all the information we have about this video, the fact that they've been detained, and the fact that this is in South Florida. This was sent in to us by one of our patrons, by the way, Troy at City Centre Yachts. He saw the video online and sent it to us. Now we tried to look into it as best we could. We couldn't find any specifics or any details about this, but what we understand is that they were illegally working on a charter vessel. Now charter yachts in Miami is very popular, and one of the things that Troy did say is that there's a lot of day charter boats in operation, and many of them are actually, after looking online and doing some research, a portion of them are operating illegally. Now when it comes to visas to work on yachts in the US, there's very specific visas that you need to have. Now even if you have the correct visas, there are limits on those visas as well. For example, and this is based on my own experience, I've spent a lot of time over the years applying for visas to the US Embassy in London and having to travel down there with all my paperwork and everything like that. So I've done that a few times. Now the 2 visas that you're most likely to have if you're working in this industry is a C1 visa, C1D, C1/D, or a B1, B2 visa. Now, for yachting crew, generally it's B1, B2 visa. Now, a B1 visa is for you to allow you to work on a boat that's based in the US, but there are limits on that visa. 180 days in any 1 year you're allowed to stay. So even if you have the correct visa, if you stay longer than 180 days, then you could end up in the situation with your hands tied behind your back, right? Now there's the other visa, the C1D, that is more for commercial vessels. So when I worked on cruise ships, we had C1D visas. Same thing applied. You have to go to the embassy, get this visa. But this visa was this was only to allow you, like I could fly into the US and then land in the US, go to my ship, a cruise ship, and then work on the cruise ship. That's all it allowed me to do. It didn't allow me to be based in the US or to work, for instance, in a dry dock facility in the US, which I've done in the past on yachts, never on a cruise ships. I did some in the Bahamas. But basically, the C1D visa is generally for commercial crew, with a yacht generally is a privately owned vessel, right? Now, there are some instances where those yachts are also commercial, but as far as I know, the yachting industry generally works on the B1 and B2 visa. The B2 part of that visa is for is for tourism. So if you have a B1, B2 and you go into the US for a holiday, they will stamp you in. As you can see in this visa here, this is one of my old visas. You can see the top there that says B2, and that was when I flew in for, I actually went in for a holiday, so I was stamped in as a B2. It shows a B1, which is when I went in to work on a yacht. And then there's another one stamped there as well that says C1, and that's for when I was on cruise ships. So, these are all, there's actually a website, YPI Crew, which is a recruitment agency. I'll post a link to it. I'll put it somewhat on screen here, and it actually has a whole section there about which visas that you need to have depending on which yacht you're going to work on. Now, I also got some information here from an official US website, and it says yacht crew members may provide services on board a recreational or commercial yacht. Yacht crew members who will provide service on board a recreational vessel traveling to the United States are classifiable as B1. Those who will provide services on board a commercial vessel and who meet the requirements under INA 101 blah 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 above are classifiable as D. So that's what I've just basically said, but in a more succinct sentence. like I said, it says B1, B2 visas it's valid for 10 years, the visa, but it allows you to stay in the US for a maximum of 180 days per entry. So so it could be that they overstayed the visa. Now, the thing about overstaying a visa in the US is that once you leave and you have overstayed, you'll struggle to get back in again in the future. So, you know, they've always been very strict, regardless of who was the president. And one other thing it says here is generally you should not be, this is very interesting actually, it says generally you should not be entering the US to look for work. However, if you find yourself already in the US on your B2 visa prior to going on board a yacht, you will have to depart from the US and re-enter on a B1 to actually work on board a yacht. So you could have a B1, B2 visa like the one I used to have here. It's expired now. You could have that visa, but if you go in for a holiday and you get a job while you're in, you have to leave and then come back in. That's crazy, but it's not crazy, but it's amazing to think that you would have to physically fly out of the country or cross over into Canada maybe and then go back in just so you can stamp in on the right visa. But they're very strict about this stuff. And like I said, as far as back as I was going into the US in 2010, and they were strict back then. So yeah, it's very interesting. Like I said, we don't have an awful lot of specific details about those crew members, but what generally happens with these crew is that they will be detained and then deported. You know, and if they're not working with the proper visas, then it actually, you know, it actually looks bad on the whole industry for people to be working illegally in a country. Like I said, very popular chartering, especially from Miami. Day charters is very popular. But you need to have the right paperwork in place before you go to do that. And so if anyone, there's another thing that people might think about, and this goes back to something we talked about recently with the flag on the vessel. That this particular vessel here, this yacht that the girls were working on, is a Jamaican flagged vessel. Now you might be thinking, well, it's a Jamaican flagged vessel, Jamaican rules apply. We did this piece about the weapons recently, and people were saying, well, when my yacht's got a US flag on it, I should be able to carry weapons. And I said, well, that's the case until you go into another territory and then the rules of that country apply. This is an example of that regardless of what the Jamaican law says about them working on that yacht, they might be fully legal in Jamaica to work on that yacht, but once the vessel goes to the US, it's the US rules that apply, and everybody needs to have a visa. All right, guys, we'll move on to the next story. Now, this is an interesting one. Now, you're going to recognize this guy's name straight away when I talk about it. But the story is about a Swiss-Belgian businessman who attempted to get Finnish authorities to overturn a decision to seize a luxury yacht from a Russian. It says oligarch. I don't generally use that word, but I'm reading from an article in a Finnish newspaper right now. Now it says the subject of the dispute is a 35-meter princess yacht named Divina Barbara. Like I said, it's a 35-meter, which is about 115 feet, 250 gross tons, princess yachts built in 2016. Now, the enforcement agency had seized the vessel in 2022 because it was considered to be under the control of a certain man called Edward Kutenitov. Now, he was on the sanctions. By this time, he was on the sanctions list. Now, Kutenitov is a former executive of the Russian oil giant Rosneft, and has close ties to the current CEO, Igor Sechin, who is a close associate of Russian President Vladimir Putin. Now, Igor Sechin, Amore Vero is attributed to him, so is Crescent in Tarragona in Spain. Although, guess who says he owns those vessels? Edward Kutenitov. Going back to the Swiss-Belgian guy who claims to own this 35-meter yacht, the limited company, wholly owned by the businessman and registered in the British Virgin Islands, owned another company also wholly owned by the businessman. This is the standard setup for owning a yacht. In his appeal against the seizure decision, the businessman said that Kutenitov did not even indirectly control the vessel, but that the ultimate owner and controller of the yacht was the businessman himself through tax haven companies. So he went out and said online, straight up that I'm doing it for tax in the tax haven company for tax reasons. The district court bailiff demanded that the appeal be dismissed. According to the bailiff, the evidence sufficiently supported the claim that Divina Barbara was under Kutenitov's control. According to the bailiff, the ownership of ships in this price range are usually concealed, which is very true. So a common arrangement, for example, is to own the vessel through a tax haven company, which is in turn leased. The vessel is then leased to the actual owner of the yacht, right? So they do it in a way that makes it look like they don't own it. I believe this is what happened with Roman Abramovich's yachts. When he had his vessels registered with this company in Cyprus, and then they were effectively leasing them to him and saying that they were a charter company, so they didn't have to pay the taxes on his fuel. Now, in the bailiff's opinion, the businessman's claim of ownership of the yacht was implausible, and that neither he nor the tax haven companies he owned had any role in relation to the seized yacht other than to conceal its actual ownership and control. The bailiff also criticised the businessman's statements to the court as unreliable. Now, the ruling in this case, Pirkanmaa district, this is in Finland, so you'll have to excuse me if I pronounce that poorly. They found that the evidence presented by the businessman did not provide sufficient certainty that he was the ultimate owner of and controller of the vessel. What he actually said was that he basically done a bareboat charter to Kutenatov since 2016 until 2022, which sounds incredible to me. A bareboat charter is basically where you charter the vessel, but there's no crew, and they have to bring in their own crew. So, among other things, the court found it implausible that the businessman had not submitted any sales documents for the vessel as evidence. According to the court, he was also unable to provide any information about the payment of the vessel's rent and expenses or the cost structure. So he had no receipts for this boat, just basically a company created in his name. Which is, like I said, which is a very normal way for people to conceal ownerships of vessels. According to the district court, the evidence presented in the case gave the impression of an unnecessarily complex chain of shell and holding companies for the purpose of arranging the ownership of a single vessel. Typically, ownership arrangements made through such tax haven companies are intended to conceal the actual owner. And that's very interesting. If you look at all of these vessels that have been seized, every single one of them has the same setup, that they're owned by companies in the British Virgin Islands, and that company is owned by another company through a trust, and it's all done to conceal. Now, there are legitimate reasons for having company own a yacht. Like if your yacht crashes into another vessel and kills a lot of people, and it's registered to you in your name, then you could be liable for a lot of things that you wouldn't necessarily be if it's in a company. So insurance and tax reasons. There are other legitimate reasons, but unfortunately, it's often done this way. And there are actually companies that are in business to do this for you. They will set up all of the companies that you need and put your asset. It doesn't have to be a yacht; it could be whatever it is, a house, a building, or whatever. And they are designed to set up these systems for you to conceal the ownership of the vessel. And that's what's being used here to conceal. Now, Edward Kutenatov supposedly owns Scheherazade, which is a 142-meter vessel. He also apparently owns Crescent, and he also apparently owns Amadea, right? He's been fighting in court, or lawyers have been fighting on his behalf in court to say that he owns that vessel. He also has an in-build vessel at Lursen, which has been put on hold because of the sanctions against him, which is only like a 65-meter, which is probably really his yacht. But it just seems a little odd, doesn't it, when you look at it that way? All right, we'll move on. It's Friday, so it's time for a Friday Yacht Spot. I've got quite a few yachts here today. Some great footage being sent in by everybody. I thank everybody in advance for sending this in. Some of it has names, some of it does not. If you want your name to be mentioned, please specifically put credit and say what the credit you want to be. If you're sending it in anonymously, you can put Kermit the Frog if you like, but just let us know who it's to be credited to. Otherwise, we'll just not mention it. So anyway, first on the list here, we've got motor yacht Arriva. This was sent in by Troy at City Centre Yachts. He's the chap who sent us in the footage about the ICE arrests. He's one of our patrons as well. This was spotted in the Bahia Mar Marina in Fort Lauderdale. Motor yacht Arriva is a luxury motor yacht built by Turquoise Yachts in 2001 and refitted in 2008. 47.5 meters, which is 156 foot. And this vessel was originally owned by, or well, it was previously owned by Johnny Depp. This is according to Troy, who sent the data in, who sold it in 2015 to J.K. Rowling, Harry Potter. And it was later sold on to Barry Diller and Diane von Furstenberg. I don't know who they are, and they're the current owners. All right, we'll move on to the next one. We've got Motor Yacht Comfortably Numb, which is a weird name. This was also sent in by Troy, who's a broker at the City Center Yachts in Miami. Comfortably Numb is a 60-meter yacht built by CRN in Italy and delivered in 2023. The owner of the super yacht is the Van Andel family, who is a wealthy family from Michigan. Next on the list, we've got High Power 3. This was sent in by Sailing Queen Lizzie 2, which is quite, I see what you did there. That's quite funny. This is a 70-meter yacht, or 230-foot yacht, launched in 2011, built in Italy by Rossinavi, has an impressive range of 7,500 nautical miles at 10 knots. All right, we'll move on. We've got Luminosity and Luminance in Montenegro, also guest appearance by Black Pearl. This is an interesting set of photos here. Luminosity, obviously, we've talked about many times on the channel. 107-meter, 353-foot yacht, almost 6,000 gross tons. Been sat there for years after Andrea Guriev bought it and then got put on the sanctions list. One of 3 yachts built by Bonetti over 100 meters. They've gone back to building smaller yachts now. Next to it there, the massive black one looks like Darth Vader's helmet. That is, it looks like, you could be mistaken for thinking that is Crescent, but it's actually Motor Yacht Luminance, built by the same company, built by Lursen, but it was built for the Ukrainian billionaire Rinat Akhmetov. It's a 145-meter yacht, 476 feet, and gross tonnage of just under 10,000 gross tons, and a cost of around $500 million. Black Pearl stats, impressive, 106 meters that vessel is, 350 feet, 2017 built by Ocean Co. in the Netherlands. It's 2,800 gross tons. It's a massive sailing yacht, 30 knots top speed, and it's got that Dynarig system on it, which I mentioned in a previous video. It basically means it can be controlled by one person with like an app on an iPad or something. I don't think it is an iPad, but they've got some controls and they can control all of the masts at the same time. All right, we'll move on. We've got Motor Yacht Nord in the Maldives. Now, no introduction needed for this vessel. Another massive vessel, 142-meter yacht. It's the same size as the vessel we just looked at, Luminance, built in 2020. Obviously, the owner is Alexei Mordashov, and it's at 9,200 gross tons. So they're actually slightly smaller than Luminance, which is incredible in gross tonnage. And then we've got, next on the list, we've got Motor Yacht Opera here. This is in Cape Town in South Africa. And it's a 146-meter or 480-foot yacht built by Lursen. Again, they build all the big ones. $450 million this vessel is apparently worth. Built in 2022 and has 12,000 gross tons. That's a gross tonnage, is one of the largest yachts in the world by gross tonnage. We need to do a new video on the largest yachts by gross tonnage, actually. I haven't done one of those for about 5 years now. Next on the list here, we got Project Cosmos. These were sent in by Bo Larenston, and this was on sea trials in Germany last week, or maybe the week before. This is a 114-meter or 374-foot yacht. One of the first yachts to be powered by, it's got methanol fuel cells, and it will basically, well, it's got fuel cell and it uses methanol, so it converts methanol into hydrogen on board. So it carries methanol, unlike Breakthrough, which is actually carrying the super-cooled hydrogen on board. This vessel, one of the things he said to me when he sent these in, he says is that the name is covered on the side of the vessel. Well, it's still sailing under its name. It's got a German flag on it because it's still registered under the project name. And it has the German flag. Once it's finished its sea trials and it actually gets delivered, then it will be transferred. The ownership will be transferred into, whatever, Cayman Islands or whatever, and then it will be named. So they've probably put the name on the side already, but they just haven't formally announced what the name is. And last on the list here for this week's video is Motor Yacht Yaz, or Yas. This is sent in by Sailing Adventures 2. And this was a former Dutch frigate for the Royal Netherlands Navy, HNLMS Piet Hein. I think it was, I don't know how you pronounce that. I'll put it on screen. And it was later bought by the UAE, converted into a yacht in 2015. So thanks very much to everybody who sent in that footage. That's been absolutely great. And I hope you enjoyed this video. Be sure to check us out on patreon.com/eSysman. We posted a video there this morning. We're posting videos pretty much all the time on there, including sometimes on the weekends as well. Last couple of weekends we've posted videos as well. So check us out there, patreon.com/eSysman. You get behind the scenes stuff. You get some of the stories that we've done today, but in a more relaxed format. And like I said, traveling stuff as well. We're traveling soon as well. So check us out, patreon.com/eSysman. If you've got any footage or information you want to send, if you've got info, send it to the address, the email address. If you've got photos and videos, please use the WeTransfer link, because it goes to somebody who sorts it all out, but he doesn't get the emails that people send in, so they get delayed when they come by emails. And also the size, especially the video, it's unusable in a video, so we don't use the videos that people send in. So please send to that in the ticker there. WeTransfer link. It's also in the description of this video, so you just go in there and click link. You do not need an account to do that. All right, guys, thanks for watching. Hope you have a great weekend. If you're out about on a yacht this weekend, please be sure to send us some photographs of a view from the bridge wing or something like that. It would be nice, and maybe we'll show them in next week's video. All right, guys, thanks for watching, and have a great one. Bye-bye.